Today, we're talking about what happens when you bring leadership skills into Alzheimer's and dementia care. For more than 25 years, Mark Wilson led leadership and HR function at Fortune 500 companies that all changed when his mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Mark made the decision to leave his corporate career and care for his mom at home. His love and commitment to his mom, combined with his ability to learn and his leadership experience, became kind of a secret sauce. He's the author of Breakthrough Alzheimer's Care, where he introduces the Bold Care Leadership Framework and 5 Breakthrough Pillars, a leadership-driven roadmap for families navigating Alzheimer's and dementia. Welcome you to the From Guilt to Good podcast. Many dementia caregivers are told, just do your best and hope things don't get worse too quickly. But what if you could actually lead care in a way that helped your loved one live happier, healthier, and even longer than anyone expected? Welcome to the From Guilt to Good podcast, where we discuss all the things caregivers wish people would talk about, but don't, won't, or can't. Hi, my name is Jeanette Yates. I'm the founder of The Self-Caregiver. I cared for my own mother for several decades and now help caregivers set boundaries and use simple tools that make care and life easier so they can feel good, not guilty. Today, we're talking about what happens when you bring leadership skills into Alzheimer's and dementia care, not in a cold corporate way, but in a way that creates more safety, more joy, and a clearer roadmap for families who feel completely overwhelmed. I'm so excited for my guest today. His name is Mark Wilson, and he is someone who brings together two worlds we don't usually see connected: executive leadership and hands-on dementia caregiving. For more than 25 years, Mark Wilson led leadership and organization effectiveness and HR function at Fortune 500 companies, including PepsiCo and Taco Bell. He coached senior leaders on how to lead people well and to create breakthrough results for their organizations. That all changed when his mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Mark made the decision to leave his corporate career and care for his mom at home. He was determined that her journey would be as long and healthy and happy as possible. What he discovered was powerful. His love and commitment to his mom, combined with his ability to learn and his leadership experience, became kind of a secret sauce. His mom lived 3 times longer and happier than anyone expected. Since his mom's passing, Mark has poured that experience into helping other families. He's the author of Breakthrough Alzheimer's Care, where he introduces the Bold Care Leadership Framework and 5 Breakthrough Pillars, a leadership-driven roadmap for families navigating Alzheimer's and dementia. He serves on the advisory board for the UCI Mind Alzheimer's Center, leads Alzheimer's support groups, advocates in Washington, D.C. for research funding and safer dementia care, mentors students who want to raise awareness and funds, and continues to speak and teach caregivers how to move from reactive and exhausted to empowered leaders in their loved ones' care. Wow, Mark, I'm honored to welcome you to the From Guilt to Good podcast. Thank you so much. I think that's the longest bio I've ever read. You've had a lot of experience.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. I'm so honored and pleased to be part of your show today. I couldn't be more excited. But yeah, no, I've done a lot of interesting things. I was a kind of executive in leadership development and organization effectiveness for a long, long time. And just like you introduced, my mom was having some kind of different behaviors. I was a little bit denial, which a lot of caregivers are. But my sister said, no, we've got to get her tested. Something is not right. So I agreed, and we did. And sure enough, she had Alzheimer's and a form of vascular dementia, both. And I realized that pretty soon I'm going to have to leave my workplace because I didn't want her to go to a facility. I wanted to take care of at home. She was the most amazing mom ever. Amazing care of both my sister and I. She worked and had all the time in the world for us somehow. And so I knew it was my turn to give back, and went to my boss and said, I'm sorry, I've got to leave. And he said, you're too young. I mean, you're not even really retirement eligible. Have you lost your mind? I said, no, this is really important. And people thought I was crazy by leaving an executive role in the middle of my career, but it was the best decision I ever made because I felt so good. And like you said, Jeanette, she lived much longer than people thought she would, or neurologists thought she would. And she was happy. You know, I used my leadership background to hire the most amazing care team ever. They were paid kind of normal, whatever the agencies paid them, but I treated them like gold. I knew how to motivate people. I knew how to retain people. They never left. These caregivers that worked for me full time for the last 6-7 years, no turnover at all in a high turnover industry.
Well, and we're going to dive deep into basically that whole story because you touched on a lot of points that I think are really going to be helpful for us to unpack as we go through this episode. So you talked about leaving your job, against everyone's advice other than your inner self that was telling you it was the right thing to do. And I'm sure, of course, your sister was supportive as well. And I know this is impossible to answer in one millennia, probably, but let's do the best we can, shall we? What did those years with your mom look like as far as you tending to her care? And what did you discover that led her to living that much longer, healthier, happier life?
Well, a lot of things went into it. One was I knew that I wanted her to be happy, and I worked by myself taking care of her for probably a year and a half. And then at the same time, I did a lot of research. I'm used to being a learning kind of person. I talked to executives and I read and found out there are lots of things that can be done to help my mom. There was no cure for Alzheimer's, but there's a lot of small things that can be done. And I thought, hey, if there's some evidence, even a little bit of evidence that something might help, why not just add all these little things together and create a program that would help her lead a happier and healthier life? And I thought, nothing to lose. There's no cure. Why not? As long as she could tolerate whatever I was doing and giving her, I thought, okay. So I started kind of down that path. But then I realized when I was doing all the caregiving, I was so tired and exhausted and burned out that I couldn't really focus on all these dozens of little things. So then I realized I needed some help. And that's when I brought in some home caregivers to help me. And thank God some insurance agent, when my dad passed away when he was like 56, said, yeah, you should get long-term care insurance for your mom just in case something happens to you since she's financially dependent on you. I said, okay. And it helped quite a bit with some of the financial parts of that. But yeah, there's lots of little things that went into that formula, including changing her nutrition quite a bit, adding some supplements that helped, an art therapy program, physical therapy every single week, no matter what. And as well as hiring this most amazing care team that not only kept her safe, but most important criteria in addition to safety was had fun with my mom. They knew how to have fun with her. They're creative. They showed so much love and compassion. They were just really special people. And all those things kind of together sort of made up the formula. And in my book, I talk about 5 pillars and that basically divide them into some segments that contribute to this journey. So
before we get into that, I do have that on my list to talk about.
Yeah.
I do want to take a moment to shout out the caregivers that part of the care team, because I had a similar experience with the people that took care of my mom, especially in those last years. But just when you find these good people that do the job well and you treat them well and they stay, they develop a relationship with you and your loved one, it becomes, I think that part is often not talked about enough. Like, it's hard enough to find good people. And then if you can just find somebody that's fine, we'll do it, we'll take it. And if that's your situation and you've got someone who works, but you just don't love them to death, it's okay. But my experience, and it sounds like yours, Mark, was this, where we really saw caring that went above and beyond what we normally get to talk about. And so I know in my mom's case, I still talk to the caregiver that was with us the last 2 years. And, I tell her, like, you better stay healthy because I'm going to want you to take care of me too. And she's like, no, you're going to have to take care of me. My mom loved her so, so much. And I don't know if your mom's relationship with them was probably different. My mom's cognitive decline did not happen until the very end. But I know that my mom's caregiver says to me all the time, your mom did just as much for me as I did for her. And I don't know if you have had a similar experience with your caregivers where they talk about how maybe you or your family or even your mom gave them something that was, not as tangible as we might think of.
I think that's really important. Yeah, no, they were part of our family, basically. I mean, I treated them so special. And I recognized when they did something great, that was important. We celebrated all their family activities. I would be very flexible on their scheduling so they can do what they needed to do. And they were special. In fact, my sister and I are still friends with all 5 of my mom's full-time caregivers. And because my mom needed 24/7 care, I had 5 amazing caregivers that stayed with me for a long. And we see them all occasionally for different activities and holidays and things. So they're still part of the family, even though it's been a few years since my mom passed. And I think a lot of things, to your point, Jeanette, one of the things was I told them my mission. And my mission was helping my mom live happier and longer and healthier. And they liked that. They said, okay, I said, you're a critical part of this mission. I can't do this without you. And that made them feel extra important. And little things like if they had a good idea, I would tell them that I'm going to tell the other caregivers about your good practice. And they liked that because, they felt like they were sharing what was important, and little things like that make a huge difference to
I
these
was going to
people.
say, Mark wasn't leadership in the same way that you were, but we're both teachers in a certain way, educating people. And that is a very effective practice that teachers often use. And I know that I used it with the people, both when we did in-home care and then when my mom transitioned to the nursing home, where I included the people that were on the professional care team as part of my care team. And I let them know, hey, I'm not, obviously my mom is my first priority, but I'm here to help you do your job. Let's work together. And so if there ever was an issue or something, I would, say, hey, we're having this issue. How can we work together on this? And just that simple reframe instead of, hey, this is a problem, fix it, without giving any insight or direction made a big difference. So that sounded very familiar when you started talking about that. Let's talk a little bit more. We'll get to the pillars in the next question. But for this one, let's stay here with this care team leadership. So what did your care team look like? So you had your home health people, you and your sister, there were doctors, physical therapists, anybody else included?
Oh yeah, yeah. I call it the extended care team. Those are for
Mm-hmm.
people like doctors. I had physical therapy come to the house, and I had a speech therapist come because my mom lost her speech pretty early on. I found my mom went to the dentist and had trouble with the dentist and was biting the dentist's hands. I thought, okay, this is not going to work. So I
Yeah.
found an amazing home dentist who
Oh,
came
wow.
and did both hygiene and normal, cavities and other dentistry things, who somehow had the magic because my mom loved her. She didn't bite her. She was very cooperative. So home dentist. And what I found, and I didn't know this when I took care of my grandmother many years ago, who had to go to a facility. You can get any kind of home resource that you can get in a facility or hospital at home. And Medicare usually pays for anything medically related. And I found all these amazing people by working with the agencies. I said, "Do you know anybody that does this?" And they usually
Mhm.
do. And so I would try them out. And if I liked them, I'd keep them. If I didn't, I'd find somebody else.
Well, and I think that's another thing that, you mentioned like the things that you tried with your mom, like to improve, like you said, even though we can't cure Alzheimer's, there's things that we can do to improve function and things like that. You would try things. If they worked, you kept them. If they didn't, you'd get rid of them. And I think that is something that we have to carry with us is where there's going to be trial and error, and there's going to be, and that's with treatments, supplements, nutrition, and even care people. Let's talk a little bit more about the strategy, structure, and accountability, how you use these things in such an emotional and personal situation.
Yeah, no, it was clear in my mind that what my job was to help my mom live longer and happier. So that was the mission. And I would try lots of different things. If they worked, I'd keep them. If they didn't, I'd try something else. And my mom was such a good sport. I mean, we were so close that she would let me try anything, and then I'd watch if it was a supplement, was there a bad reaction or not, and if make decisions accordingly. And she totally trusted me, and which made my role as care leader. That's the way I
Mhm.
thought about my role. I wasn't a caregiver because I wanted my caregivers to be the caregivers, and they were the frontline connection. I know a lot of people use caregivers and they do things like cleaning and cooking and all that. My sister and I were the cooks and the cleaners and did everything else. So I wanted them to focus 100% of their time on taking care of my mom. And we were supporting them. And I was the care leader, kind of creating the kind of architecture for all the care and doing all the behind the scenes stuff like cooking and cleaning and all that so they could focus. And they did it. So the relationship that they had, because they knew their job was to keep my mom safe and entertained and have fun. And that was 100% of their job, which was really clear to them and to me. And it worked beautifully.
So, a couple things. One,
Yeah.
you mentioned, and I do want to acknowledge this because some people are listening to this and saying, well, that's really nice for Mark that his mom was cooperative with all this because my mom, XYZ. And so, we do want to always acknowledge that not every experience is the same, and your loved one may be pushing back
Mhm.
nonstop on everything. The situation may be different, but there are some things that Mark has learned and is teaching care leaders to do that are really helpful. And so even if you're like, well, I can't relate to his relationship with his mom's, hang in with us because we're going to get there. I also wanted to, before we move on to your framework and the 5 pillars, I want to ask if this structure that you created, if this the way that you led your team, if that really, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway, if that really allowed you and your sister to have more of that deeper relationship with your mom, that you were allowed to be her son, your sister was allowed to be her daughter. How did that show up for you?
Oh, I think that's really important. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we were care leaders, but we were connecting with my mom every single day. And it was beautiful because the caregivers did the heavy lifting on cleaning and eating and all that. And then we were there to kind of provide support and connection with my mom. And it worked out great, that approach. But yeah, I realized everybody's a little different. I lead these support groups now, and people come in and they say, oh, their loved one's all agitated and, hit me today or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get that everybody's different, but I think the principles of care and love and connection are the same. And
Yes.
what's interesting about this disease, it goes through phases. I mean, we've had people come into the support groups that for a month or two, their loved one is agitated and angry. And then a few months later, they become a little bit calmer and more
Mm-hmm.
docile. And so it changes. So if you're taking care of somebody now that's very agitated and aggressive, hang in there because it's probably going to change.
That's a good point. And like we mentioned, trial and error, keep coming back. And then to your point, sometimes if you try something now and it doesn't work, just put it in your back pocket. You can you can try it again later. So that's something that really worked well for me. Okay, now we get to the nitty gritty. So let's talk about your book, Breakthrough Alzheimer's Care. I have my copy right here, reading through it right now. It's beautiful, by the way. So, in the book, you introduce bold care leadership, which is kind of what we've been talking about here, the idea of leading as a caregiver and leading the care team. And you have 5 breakthrough pillars for caregivers who are brand new to this language. They're not in the leadership and HR space, for example. Let's walk through what these pillars are and why they matter. So, I can just let you go if you want to, or we can walk
Sure.
through them one by one.
So pillar number one is self-care and having the energy and focus on your leadership role and the importance of you to the team. If you're not being a bold care leader, leading your direct caregivers and your extended care team of doctors, and you're not focused on the actions that are needed, you're not going to help your loved one. So in my book, I talk about there's sort of internal sources of that self energy and external sources. Internal sources are like, get behind the why. Why are you doing all this? Because you love your loved one. I mean, love is about sacrifice. I mean, I know people talk about a lot of things are written about love and talked about, but in the end, real love is a test of sacrifice. Are you willing to do what it takes to help your loved one? And that mission or that kind of internal, some people draw on their faith, their whatever is important to you, but internally get behind why this is important. And second is external sources, things like eating right, getting some exercise, getting some socialization as a care leader. Those are external sources of self energy and self care. So that's number one.
I want to talk a little bit more about this because you talk about the internal and external, which I love that way to break that down. I think that's really interesting. And the one question, and I saw it in the book too, was like, are you willing to do what it takes? That's internal. And then the external is, taking care of yourself physically and, emotionally. But sometimes I wonder if I feel like it sometimes as caregivers, the message we internalize is, I'm going to do what it takes. And that means, and I know that love means sacrifice. So that means I'm going to sacrifice my own time, my own needs, my own life outside of caregiving because this person needs me. And can you walk through how to balance the type of sacrifice that is loving versus the type of sacrifice that's more codependent?
No, that's a really interesting question. Yeah. I mean, I think sacrifice, a lot of it's how do you think about it? How do you reframe it? Even though I sacrificed my career and time and, I lost an important relationship in my life due to this sacrifice. Those are sacrifices, but I also got a lot out of it. I mean, I felt really important taking care of my mom. I got the reward of that. And so it's like how do you frame things? Helping somebody a loved one with Alzheimer's is the toughest, hardest thing that person has ever been through by far. They can't articulate that, but and so helping them in their biggest, darkest hour of need in their entire life should feel good because you're making a difference. You're helping them be happier and healthier, and so looking at that part and reframing the sacrifice as a positive. I can't really measure it, but I think I've become a little bit better person by the sacrifice I made to take care of my mom. And I think those are ways to think about it differently.
For those people who are listening or watching today, remember that he's talking about this and he did make sacrifices. He quit, a great career to stay home, but then he also did not do it alone. And so one of the things that I really want to make sure that you're hearing in all of this conversation is he built this team of people to help him do this hardest job ever. So yes, we make sacrifices. It may mean leaving a job. It may mean restructuring a lot of parts of our lives, but it doesn't mean we have to do it alone. And so I think that's really important. And when we're not doing it alone, it does make it easy. When we're not doing it by ourselves, it does make it easier for us to take care of ourselves and the relationships outside of our caregiving relationships.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I again, I did it alone for a year and a half, 2 years, and then it was too much for me. So there are people that do it alone for much longer than I could, but I give them so much credit because it's by far the hardest thing you could ever do, especially if you think you're going to do it yourself, because it's super hard and you need help. At some point, you're going to need help.
Yeah, exactly. All right. One of the reasons people need help is because of the safety issue. So let's talk about the second pillar is safety.
Safety is kind of common sense. Like your loved one's not going to be happy and live longer if they're not safe. They're going to get hurt, and if they're shorten their life. They're certainly going to not be happy if they're bedridden or, break a leg or a hip or whatever. So safety is a very important part of longevity and happiness. And there's lots of simple little things that you can do for safety. I include these things in the book, but things like fall risk, there's lots of things you can do to make a walker. Some people don't like to use a walker. So my mom was a kindergarten teacher forever. So she loved kids and fun things. So we decorated her walker with stuffed animals and fun, crazy things. So she wanted to use it, even though most people don't want to feel like they need a walker. My mom walked because of physical therapy, walked until the very end, but she needed a walker just for security and safety. And so we would, make it fun for her. Little things like in the bathroom, because if there was a fall, there wasn't, but if there was, I thought, okay, well, falling on a tile can really be bad. So we borrowed from kind of kids' ideas. There's these foam play tiles that we put in the bathroom that are kind of jigsaw put together. You've probably seen these.
Oh yeah, every caregiver and parent is nodding their heads. Yes.
So if my mom had fallen, she would be okay. And so bed rails, little things like that, motion sensors. So if you need to leave the room, your loved one, the alarm goes off, so you can go in there and make sure they don't get up on their own and fall. And a lot of little things, nothing very expensive. I mean, you can do all that at home, for $400 or $500 in total, not even maybe. And then if your loved one is in a facility, which happens for a lot of people, make sure the facility has these things too and that are safe. And so,
I love that you mentioned that. My mom, she spent a lot of time in and out of the hospital before she went to the nursing home. But every time she would go in, or every time we would go see her neurologist, they would run through this questionnaire and they would say, "Are you afraid of falling?" And she just would laugh and laugh. And they would say, "Why are you laughing?" She's like, "Well, I mean, I'm not afraid I'm going to fall. I mean, it's going to happen. So I've just learned how to fall well." And for years, she was able, earlier on in her disease, she was able to fall and then get back up. And then of course it became where she would fall and not be able to get back, so we had to adjust things. But I remember she just would laugh and be like, "Oh, I'm not afraid. It's not like I'm worried." I mean, she's like, "It's inevitable." So there are things that we did to help her not fall, like use a walker. And then she ended up using a wheelchair, et cetera, et cetera. I also know that in the nursing home, when she started to have a little bit of cognitive decline, and for reasons that I will not go into now, it's a totally different conversation. They do not like to put bed rails on the beds, especially in her unit, because she wasn't in a memory care unit. She was, because she really just, her cognitive decline was very, very towards the end. So by the time she had it, she wasn't moving. So she was still fully cognitively aware. But every now and then she would forget, especially if you wake up in the middle of the night. I don't know if you've ever done this where you wake up and you think you're late to school and then you realize it's 2026 and you're not. So things like that would happen. She would wake up and have to go to the bathroom and then not remember that she couldn't walk, right? So she'd try to get out of bed and fall. So they would lower her bed all the way down to the floor. And then they had a pad, like you say, like a comfortable pad. So if she tried to get up, first of all, it would just be a matter of rolling. And then, like you said, the sensors would go off. But there are things that you can do to make things safer. But I remember one day walking into the nursing home and being like, does it look like she's on a cot on the floor? And they were like, "We have to do that until she remembers that she can't get out of bed." But anyway,
No, you're right. There's a lot of little things like that. I mean,
yeah,
just,
yeah.
shower chairs, raised toilets with rails, I mean, a lot of little things like that. And eating safety is another thing I talk about in the book, because that's very common for dementia patients to have trouble swallowing. They get aspiration pneumonia and they got big problems. So, little things like I don't know how it hit me, but I was at a Walmart once and I saw these little kids utensils that are rubber and smaller. And I thought,
Yes.
what a great idea, because my mom would bite on things sometimes. So if she bit on a rubber little teeny thing, she's gonna be
Yeah.
okay. So I thought, why not? And then also the portions were much smaller with these little kid utensils. And she fed herself, until the very end. But I used these utensils to make sure her portions were small, and that if she had a problem, it wouldn't break her teeth or mouth. So
Yeah. That's
little,
such a
lot
good
of little
idea.
things, yeah, a lot of little things like this are, in my book, and they're simple, but
Yeah.
they kept my mom very safe and
Mhm.
secure.
I love that you mentioned the raised toilets too, because of course, growing up, my mom, we had raised toilets
Mhm.
to help my mom. And so like, I got kind of spoiled with it. I would go somewhere else and be like, what is wrong with this toilet? So low. Anyways. And then of course, now everybody has a raised toilet because none of us want to be inconvenienced by, but anyway, so yeah, but those little things do make a big difference.
Yeah.
And there are small ways that you can keep your loved one safe. Thank you so much. And then the third pillar
Third,
is
third
care.
pillar is this is called identify and keep the finest care team ever.
Love
And that
this.
includes the direct caregivers, and then includes your extended team like doctors and other specialists. So the idea here is that your loved one deserves the best. And any HR person or anybody knows that, like any profession, caregivers, doctors, you name it, have a range of skills. You have poor ones, you have average ones, you have good ones, and you have, I call them gurus. And so your loved one at minimum needs a good doctor, needs a good caregiver, needs a good physical therapist, whatever it is. And if you live in a semi-suburban area, there's dozens and dozens of all these experts to choose from. You don't have to put up with somebody who is average and or poor. And so I would, like caregivers, I would interview these caregivers. And in my book, I have an interview protocol, what to ask and what to look for by the answers. And you find the best people, and then I would give them a trial shift. And if I like them, if I like the way they made my mom safe and they're having fun with her, then I'd keep them. If I didn't, I'd say, agency, give me some more people.
Right.
And I use more than one agency because you have a bigger talent pool to choose from if you use multiple agencies to identify candidates. And the same with doctors. If a doctor wasn't treating my mom with, kid gloves and beautifully, or wasn't available, for weeks for an appointment, or wouldn't talk to me on the phone, I found another doctor, because
Yeah.
you deserve the best. So
And again, I just want to acknowledge for those of you. So in our case, if we wanted the insurance company to pay, we had to use one agency, and which made it harder, but it still did not mean that I couldn't ask for someone else if I needed to. And then when we realized that we needed more care than what the insurance company was going to pay for, and I decided to pay for we did some private pay. I did do that, looking for the best place. And what's so interesting is where I ended up finding my person that I still talk to, or my mom's person, I should say, was somewhere you would have never. I don't even know that they have a website, but it was word of mouth, referral, talking to the person that ran this small agency. And so like sometimes you have to get creative and do some digging. So yes,
no,
I love
totally.
that. And then, like you said, one of the hardest things that happened, and it happened towards the end of my mom's life, but my mom had the same doctor for her main issues for 20 plus years. And as she got worse, he got more frustrated, not necessarily with her, but just with the fact that he couldn't fix it. And it caused us to feel like we weren't seen and heard, because he just was like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I don't know what else to do. And I remember feeling like I've got to get someone else to get eyeballs on her, even though we love this guy. He's been around forever. He's watched my kids grow up. Like, we're connected to him just like we were our caregivers, et cetera. But we need, even if the second opinion tells us the same thing, we need to get someone else to look at this, because what we were feeling like was just that the hands were getting thrown up, like, I'm out,
Yeah.
I'm done. And so I think that's really important too, is at the end of the day, we do like to build relationships with these people, but the bottom line is they're not your
Yeah.
friends.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And with dementia patients, it's very difficult to go to a doctor. We know
Right.
that because
Yes.
agitation and whatever. So if a doctor is treating your loved one and they're not coming up with a diagnosis that's accurate, a good comprehensive treatment plan, you can't go to a bunch of doctors. I mean,
Hmm.
I kind of went down that journey with my mom and realized that, whoa, time out. I got to find a
Right.
guru because whatever she had a feminine condition called vulvodynia, which is
Hmm.
basically vulvar pain, and nobody figured out what it was. And I said, okay, enough. I got to find out what this is and get it treated. And I found it took by creative. I thought, okay, there was like a generally understanding. Went to 3 or 4 doctors. They said we think it's something called vulvodynia. We don't. One of them suggested like a major surgery. I said no,
Oh, goodness.
we don't know enough yet. Yeah. So I said no, we're not doing that. And so anyway, I Googled it and I said there's a National Vulvodynia Association. Who knew?
Right.
But I called them up and I said, okay, I want a membership directory to figure out if there's anybody in my area. And I said, well, he said, are you a doctor? No, but I'll pay a membership fee. So I sent them
Right.
$100 and they sent a membership fee. And there's, I don't know, hundreds of doctors all over the world. And I was ready to take my mom anywhere. But I found out down in San Diego, which is only less than an hour from our house, there was a guru that did research and did presentations on this topic. Anyway, so I made an appointment with him. He was guru, head of the whole gynecology department, easy to schedule. Like it took a
Right.
week to get a schedule, not hard. And in one session, he talked about creativity. He applied something that worked for another kind of
Right.
urological condition to this my mom's condition and did like PTNS, which is like a nerve stimulation. And in 2 sessions, she was cured. So I mean, completely non-invasive, completely simple, applying creatively applying something that worked in another context, in a new context, and it worked. And it was like, so you have to find a guru sometimes that just is a step up above an expert in that field.
Resources or
Yeah.
whatever is don't be afraid to ask, like make the ask. It may not be usually how things work,
Mhm.
but you never know until you ask. And if you get a no, you can push back if you want, or at least you know that the answer is no. A lot of
Right.
times, I think, especially when we're talking to doctors or we're talking to associations or we're talking to or hospital administrators, right? We get this idea of like, well, they are the head honcho, they are the know-it-all, whatever they say goes. And it's like, but it's okay to ask, can I get this
Yeah.
or can I get this directory, or can I
Hmm.
get a membership, or can I, we should do more making them tell us no instead of
Hmm.
just assuming the answer is no.
Yeah. No,
um
totally. Yeah.
and a lot of times they don't want to say no, so they'll just say yes.
And we know doctors are, I mean, for good reason, they're very
Yeah.
confident. Sometimes they have a little bit of an ego.
Yeah.
And your job as care leader is to manage them as part of your team, like a
Yeah.
caregiver or anybody else. And doctors don't like to be managed, but in my book, I have a list of questions to ask a doctor if your loved one has dementia. And it's a good list of questions. And a lot of doctors are, I call them speedsters in my book. They like to like race through there. And your
Mm-hmm.
job as care leader is to make them focus, to
Yep.
understand your loved one's unique conditions and to think about it and come up with a really good treatment plan. These questions are designed to slow the doctor down and focus. And you hand a copy of it to the doctor and you keep a copy and you say, during our appointment, I'd like these questions answered. And some of the doctors like, what? Other doctors will take the time and that might give you a clue as to which doctors are better.
Right.
So, and then you get your questions answered and it works out great. I used it all the time. And then in my book, I have another tip. If the doctor doesn't want to answer the questions and they're trying to race out the door, you slowly kind of inch your way in front of the door.
Yeah.
You don't actually block them, but you standing in front of the door gives them a pause to say, okay, maybe I can't run out the door. He's standing right there.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, doctors respond to someone who seems like they have put some thought into it before they've gotten there. And I know that's really hard because sometimes as caregivers, it's like all we can do to get there. Or even, for me, my mom was bedbound the last 2 years. And eventually I was like, I'm not paying for transport to go to the doctor unless they have to do something. Like
Right.
we can just go on a video call. But even sometimes that was a lot because my mom could barely stay awake. And so that was a lot. So I know what it's like to just making it is hard enough. But if we go, like you said, you have these set questions, and then there's other times, like with my mom's illness was different, but there were specific things that I knew to ask and specific ways that you learn to ask the question to get the answer that you need. And I think it's okay to keep asking if you still don't understand the answer that they give you. A lot of times people will ask a question, they will get an answer that is gobbledygook nonsense to them, and then they'll go, okay, and then they won't ask back. And I highly encourage you to, I would rather you push back on the doctor and make them answer it in a way that they understand than you get home and try to Google whatever they were saying to try to figure out if you can answer, if you understand it.
Totally.
I would rather you do that. Okay, moving on. We have two more: brain and body health, and then my personal favorite name of the surround sound. So let's talk about brain and body health first.
Yeah, so number 4 of the 5 pillars is brain and body health. And so a lot of it's common sense. I mean, there's a lot written about healthy diet, for example, that help you avoid getting dementia. But I also did research that said a healthy diet can also slow down dementia. So I changed my mom's nutrition profile completely. I mean, vegetables, fruits. She couldn't really eat beef because of the chewing and the swallowing, but would get like plant-based proteins and other things. So and my mom was a good sport. She put up with all this crazy healthy stuff. So that was part of it. And also supplements. Now, talk about doctors. Doctors don't like to talk about supplements because they're not prescriptions. But there's a lot of supplements that are out there that, again, have a little bit of evidence that they can help both physical and brain health. And we know the brain and the body are connected. So if you have a healthy body, you're more likely to have a healthy brain because, we know diabetes and high blood pressure and those things affect your brain and vice versa. So some supplements, and I'd list them in the book, are worth a try if your loved one can take them without any problems, which my mom did. They help. And so brain and body health are, working together, and it's common sense, and it helped her a lot. Again, I don't know what supplement or what nutrition did what. I didn't care so long as the whole bunch of stuff together made a big difference.
Well, and I love how you're talking about this because you're pointing out that what worked for your mom and what your mom was able to tolerate might be different than from somebody else. And so again, we're going back to that trial and error, but there are things that, are worth giving a try. Like you said, Alzheimer's is terminal. So we might as well try what we can, right? And so I really love that approach. And I think that's a responsible way to address the health and nutrition part of things, because there are a lot of people out there selling things as cures that are not. But when you approach it as, let's look at some of these things that might be helpful, if they're not hurting and they might be helpful, let's try them and see what works. I think that's a really responsible way. So I appreciate that. All right. Thanks. Tell me about surround sound.
Okay. So surround sound, this is an interesting kind of background. As a Taco Bell HR leader, one of the projects I had was kind of interesting sort of background is, I was working with the head of marketing, and we had 15 restaurants. They called them experimental restaurants in Tucson, Arizona, the whole market. We could do anything we wanted. So I did a lot of things. One of the things I did is I brought in a consultant, and he talked about touch points. And his concept was every single touch point that a customer has before they get to the restaurant, what do they see, hear, experience in the restaurant, what do they feel like when they leave. And somehow I just made that connection. I thought, well, my mom's world are like touch points. So I need to think about her world as surround sound. Everything that touches her either helps her be safer or helps her have more fun, energy, and love. And so I thought about her physical environment as the first part. And so I made everything fun. We put stuffed animals. We decorated her pictures. My mom used to love the adult coloring book drawings, and they were beautiful.
I love that.
So we put them all over the house. And so like a kid, Alzheimer's patients are a lot like kids. We showed her how proud we were of what she did, and she was smiling at all these pictures. And so the environment has to be surround sound, positive, loving, everything like that, and safe. And the safety part was every moment you think about it, every hour, every week, there's opportunities to be safer or less safe, have fun, more fun. And so the whole surround sound environment was both physical and for safety and fun. And then I thought about the same thing with people. It's okay. Everybody who touches my mom, whether it's a caregiver or a doctor or anybody, friends, they have to make it positive, make it loving, and make it fun. And if they weren't, if I could fire them, I would. If I couldn't, then I would, I don't want to fire her friends. I would pull them aside and say, hey, have some fun with her. Okay. So I was like,
yeah.
And, so that's the idea of surround sound, that everything should be reinforcing and consistent with either, fun, enjoyable, love, compassion, and safety. So when my mom like your mom, she had to go to the hospital for a thing. And I thought, I want to decorate the hospital room with all this stuff too. And they were and the hospital was very supportive. They said, okay, yeah, we can bring all this stuff in. And we had our caregivers come to the room. They did all their shifts in the hospital room with my
Hmm.
mom, just like they
I did
were at
that
home.
too. Hmm.
Yeah, and it was like, why not? I mean, if the hospital let them do it, that made sense. Yeah, so that's
Um,
kind of the surround sound. Everything surrounding your loved one should be reinforcing and supportive of fun, love, compassion, understanding, and safety.
My mom spent so much time on the neurology floor of her hospital here. When she was a bit huge, which may not be on the things that someone with dementia should drink, but she did not have dementia at the time, and she drank a lot of Diet Coke. So when they would see that she was on the list to be admitted, when we would get there, they would have an ice bucket. So they would use one of those bath buckets, fill it with ice, so that her Diet Cokes could be cold. And they had everything set up for her just like she liked it, her gowns that were different than other people's, and all of that kind of stuff. And then, of course, due to the sheer just amount of time she was in the hospital, so many Mother's Days, so many birthdays, so many Christmases, she was in so many Easters, she was in the hospital, and they would help us decorate or sometimes show up with birthday gifts or birthday balloons for her. And so just trying to make it, the fact that she had to be there not
Yeah,
as bad as it could have been, it's more
totally.
fun. But
Yeah.
I do love that. And I love the idea of just that surrounding of all of these different touch points. Anyway, we're moving on to something that I thought about when I first, when we first were connected. I was like, okay, this guy is a big leadership executive person. He's got these skills already and he's using them as a caregiver, which is great. But there are some people like me and like some people that are listening that are like, yeah, I am a chaos agent. I'm not very leadery. Like, how does this look for someone who doesn't feel naturally like a natural leader or confident in leadership roles? Can we still do this, Mark? Can we do
I
it?
think so. Yeah, that's a great question. Okay. So yeah, no, I mean, if you break it down, it's pretty simple stuff. I mean, a lot of leadership is a lot about, mindset. Think of yourself as someone who is responsible for your loved one's care. And in my book, I talk about some mindset shifts. And one of them is just shifting from, okay, it's not a burden to take care of your loved one, it's a privilege, things
Mm-hmm.
like that. Or I'm not just supporting my loved one's care, I'm leading it and I'm
Mm-hmm.
accountable. And so, little mindset shifts like that are very doable for people. And then
Mm-hmm.
you think about other parts of the leadership, selecting good people. Okay, you can interview somebody. I mean, you can follow my interview protocol in my book or just
Mm-hmm.
use your common sense when you talk to people. And, interviewing good people, providing a little bit of direction, some feedback if you see something that a caregiver does that you don't like. In my book, I have a coaching model. Basically, it's questions. So you don't have to do a lot of telling. You can just ask them, okay, this situation here, what do you think could have gone better? And then
Mm-hmm.
they come up with their own ideas to solve their own problems. Because leadership, you don't have to be an expert on things to be a good leader. I mean, I led people on my team that knew a lot more about their specialty than I did, but I knew enough, a little bit, so I could at least ask questions and see if what was being done was done well or not well. And that's leadership. Leading care is the same way. You don't have to be an expert on all your doctor stuff, but you can, Google your loved one's condition and know enough to be able to ask good questions, know enough, a little bit about caregiving,
Mm-hmm.
as you watch your caregivers to be able to see what's good and what's not good. And it's a lot of it's common sense. And so that's leadership applied to caregiving. You don't have to be a leadership guru to just use these little
Right.
simple common sense things.
Right. Well, and I think if we do step into that confidence a little, like I talk a lot about confidence in the work that I do, because it's not about is it the right decision or the wrong decision. We've got to make a billion decisions every day. They all have consequences. We've just got to know, we've got to learn to be confident in knowing that we're doing the best we can. We're making informed choices. And that's one of the things I talk about with technology is like, be informed about the choices you're making, and then do it with confidence and know that it's not going to be perfect all the time, but you can do it with confidence. I do also want to take a moment for people, because you said something, and I have some caregiver friends that are going to be like, oh, if she does not push back on that, they're going to turn me off. So for many people, it does help to reframe
Mhm.
the idea of caregiving being a burden. And so I'm not anti doing
Mhm.
that. However, for some people, caregiving really is a burden. And like you said, our circumstances are different. Maybe our relationship with our loved one is different. Our financial circumstances are different. This can be a burden. And so for some people to deny that could be more harmful, I think, to the caregiving situation. I've done a couple of different things with different caregiving relationships I've had over my life. There was one person one time that I was mentoring. Actually, I wasn't really her caregiver, but I was mentoring her, and she said, "I don't want to be a burden to her partner that was caring for her." And I said, "But what if he acknowledges that it is a burden, but he's okay with carrying it?" Like, I think, especially depending on your faith, you may feel called to carry another person's burdens, right? And so for me to act like it's not a burden is denying myself the opportunity to carry that burden willingly. So that's one thing. And then for me, a shift that I made, because I was in a position where I didn't, like you, I didn't choose to leave a job and become a caregiver. I was told, "You're going to help mommy," when I was 9 years old. And then 40 years later, I was still doing it, I did. And so at some point, as an adult, I was like, I would listen to podcasts or listen to probably television shows at the time. And they would say something like, "Well, we've chosen to do this." And I'd be like, "Wait, what? Who are you? What are you talking about? I didn't choose this." And so what I did was I stopped and I said, "Okay, let's say right now you do get to make a choice. You can make a choice right now, from now until the rest of the time your mom's alive. Do you want to take care of her or not?" And I said to myself, "Yes, I do." But then once I did that, I was able to say, "And I get to decide how this is going to work best for both of us." And so that is a different way that I handled that whole, like, is it a blessing? Is it a burden? I had to both acknowledge the, not ideal situation I was in, that I didn't want to be there, but here I was, but that I could. And I guess that's a form of the leadership that I decided to take control of what I could and start managing that situation better. But I did have to acknowledge it. So before I got a bunch of text messages from my friends.
No, I didn't mean to imply that it's not a burden. I mean, it's hard. It's the hardest thing that anybody could ever do. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, working 60, 70 hours a week as an executive was a piece of cake compared to caregiving. No, really, it's super hard, but a lot of it's about mindset and whether you're willing to carry that burden.
Yeah.
And the other thing too,
you can walk around in this totally sucks all the time. Like, you could it does, but you could choose to spend the time in that or in something else that's more positive, I think is the point too. Like, both of those things can be true, but you can focus on one more than the other. Right. So,
well, and the idea is that if you can stay focused on, there's a concept I mentioned in the book called the mood elevator. Mm-hmm. And if you're low on the mood elevator, you're wallowing in the difficulty and it's stopping you from being effective and happy. But if you can figure out ways and I talk about some of those ways to go higher on the mood elevator, you're not only going to be a better care leader, but you're going to have a happier view of your situation too. And sometimes people, because there's resentment, I mean, my relationship with my mom was good. That's not always the case. I know a lot of people in my support groups that I lead go to therapy, and a psychologist or therapist can help you with kind of getting through that resentment. So at least enough so that you can at least be a good care leader for your loved one.
Yes.
And so
I'm a big fan of therapy. So I advocate for that all the time. Yeah. Okay. So now we get into, let's talk just briefly about your advocacy work. You are involved with UIC Mind. You can tell us a little bit about that, support groups, Consumer Watchdog. Yeah. I want you to talk a little bit about that. And then for some of us who are interested in advocacy work, but don't know where to get started, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's so funny. I connected with the local Alzheimer's Association chapter in Orange County, Southern California. And I love the people there, and they knew I was caring. The first thing they asked me, "Do you want to be a support group leader?" So I started that way, and I love doing that. And then, got more involved with them. And then they said, "Oh, we're going to Washington, D.C., and you want to come and help us advocate to Congress?" And I said, "Sign me up." I was a political science major as an undergraduate. Always interested in politics. And so I thought, yeah, that's fun. And then I do fundraising, and I just finished leading a bunch of high schoolers in this mentor program. And they said, "Well, you're an executive coach. Why don't you be a mentor to these teenagers?" And I thought, mentor to teenager? I don't have any teenagers. I'm not sure how good I'll be, but I learned a lot of teenage slang in the process.
Yes.
But it was fun. I enjoyed it. And so, yeah, your local chapter of Alzheimer's is a good way to kind of,
Hmm.
get your feet wet if you want to help and advocate and do whatever you did. That's how that was my avenue to all these things.
Yeah.
And so I
Well, and I
enjoy.
think every time I ask somebody about that, I'm like, oh, I'm interested. They're like, if you do one Google search into whatever area of healthcare caregiver you want to, they're begging for people to step in and advocate. So you won't have to dig too far. It's not too much
No,
of a
no, they
deep
need
hole.
the help. They need the help, and
Yeah.
they're very supportive, and they recognize you for your contributions and so forth. And
Yeah.
you talked about grief before. This
Mm,
was my method to get through grief. I was devastated when my mom passed away.
mm,
She passed away actually not due to Alzheimer's, but due to a mistake,
right.
medical negligence. And that's another whole talking about decision making. That was the worst decision I ever made to authorize something that I shouldn't have. But anyway, those things were ways that I got through grief. The book and doing these things helped me stay positive and giving and contribution, because it's, losing your loved one is hard, really hard. And so you need some kind of positive action to help you get through the grief. And this was my way to help me.
Okay. But a lot of caregivers listening to this right now, they're stressed out. What is one thing you want dementia caregivers who are burned out to know right now?
The first thing is get help. I know it's expensive, but try to figure out whether, if you don't have long-term care insurance, I get it, it's expensive, but try to get some help. And sometimes that
Yeah.
help can come from a paid caregiver. Sometimes it's a relative or, a friend. There's lots of different roles in care, from direct caregiving to helping with, groceries and this and that and doctors, and get help, because you can't do it alone. You'll be burned out. You'll be negative. You won't be happy. Your loved one won't benefit. If there's one thing I would say, figure out how you can get the help you need to at least bring yourself to a place where you're not feeling alone and lonely and doing
Mhm.
all this.
Yes, and I think that's always the key. Everybody wants a simple answer, and that is a simple answer. It's not easy because we do have to
Mhm.
seek out support. Sometimes we have to insist on it from people who are able but reluctant. Sometimes in our families we might have that situation, but it's worth it. Like you mentioned, as the first pillar, if we're not leading ourselves well in the realm of self-care, it trickles down to everything else. And so I think that's very important. Okay, this blows my mind, but we're going to talk about the resources that your book provides.
Mhm.
In your book, Breakthrough Alzheimer's Care, which is a resource in itself. You break everything down. You've got your framework and the pillars. You have questions that people can ask doctors. You have all of these ways to interview people, strategies. In addition to that, you've collected a list of over 50 resources, everything from evaluating medical information and physician expertise, financial resources, nutrition, supplements. When you're looking at the landscape of caregiver resources right now, what are you most excited about and what are you concerned about? Where do we need to work?
No, it's a great question. I think the hardest part is the financial part of getting help. And so there's no magic bullet to that. I mean, I was fortunate enough to this crazy insurance agent talk me into getting long-term care insurance for my mom. So that's an area, if you're listening to this podcast and your loved one isn't deep into all dementia already,
Mm-hmm.
look into long-term care insurance, because
Right.
that's a blessing. Problem is, if they're already diagnosed with dementia, you won't qualify, because
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the criteria. But if your parents or you're kind of getting older, think about getting that. It's well worth it. And I tell people it's expensive, but it paid more than 5 times more in back to me in reimbursement than I paid
Mm-hmm.
in premiums. And there are no investments that pay 5 times 500% return. So it's worth it,
Yeah,
because
my mom
Alzheimer's.
paid.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom, she was on Medicaid, but she did have the opportunity to purchase the long-term care plan through Medicaid. And we did receive a lot of benefit from that as well. And I always encourage people to, like, some of this stuff, it's too late for your loved one, but you get to, this is another great benefit of being a caregiver, is you get to decide, like, oh, how do I want this to play out for me? And when I am aging, whether or not I have dementia or a chronic illness, how do I want this to look for me? And look into ways to make sure that you're able to provide the care, your family's able to provide the care for you that you want. And so I think that's a good step as well. Does it look like long-term care insurance? Does it look like something else? Explore these options. There are elder care attorneys and long-term care insurance people out there that will talk to you about these things. And so be sure to look at that. Mark, this has been a great conversation. This has been so rich and so practical. Before we wrap up, share with our listeners how they can connect with you, where to find your book, Breakthrough Alzheimer's Care, and how to access your free caregiver resources like the doctor's question guide. Is it in the book, or is it an additional resource they can get, or both?
Yeah, no, I thank you. Yeah. So my book, you can get it on Amazon, you can get it on barnesandnoble.com. The best way to kind of check out the book, because it's got a lot of the elements in it, including some free resources, is go to my website, and it's boldcareleader.com. And if you check that out, then there's lots of information about me and about the book and some free tools and things you can download. But boldcareleader.com is my website. You can learn all about it. And I've got some podcasts, and going to add this one eventually too there. You can kind of hear more about me. And so, yeah, no, so that's the best way. I would check out my website.
Thank you so much, Mark, for joining me today. You can connect with Mark at boldcareleader.com and find his book, Breakthrough Alzheimer's Care, along with his free caregiver resources there. I will link everything in the show notes, so head straight there. And if this conversation resonated with you, please share it with a caregiver in your life. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find more resources at JeanetteYates.com. Until next time, feel good, not guilty.
Thank you, Jeanette.